I was reading something in a Scientific American recently, or it might be New Scientist, I think it was Scientific American though, and it was to do with what we refer to as the phi response, or maybe phi pattern, PHI, which is a particular pattern of brain activation which corresponds to a number of behaviours and abilities. And I think the fact that there are different kinds of abilities which correspond to this phi response, or different situations which seem to provoke it, suggests that there might be a relationship, well, it suggests to me, and I'm probably speculating beyond the data here, but suggests to me there might be a relationship between those different things, which I'm finding quite tantalising, I guess. The first thing that's apparently been found to do with that is that individuals who are, let me get this right, individuals who are particularly good at monitoring their own internal state are good, tend to develop the phi response, which I guess may mean just that the phi response is some kind of correlation with that monitoring process. I don't know, but certainly if you are one of those people who can quite easily listen to the sound of their own heartbeat, you will also have a corresponding phi response. Apparently some people find it quite easy to listen to their own heartbeat, and some people find it enormously difficult and can only hear their heartbeat when it's very quiet or when they're very stressed and their heart is pounding. And I think that's true for other kinds of somatic responses. The ability to feel the tensions in certain sets of muscles, that kind of thing as well. Some people are very find it very easy to gauge those things, and other people don't. So that's the first suggestion there. The second is to do with empathy, which is that, again, I'm not absolutely sure of the findings here, but this is what I seem to remember, is that people who are able to empathise with other individuals, who are able to accurately gauge the emotional state of someone they're talking to, is also likely to show increased levels of this phi activation pattern. So if you're sitting across the table with someone, and then you can get this sense that this person's unhappy about something, or this person is trying to hide something, and is slightly stressed as a result of that, even though there may be nothing overtly obvious. They're not crying, they're not acting in an overtly suspicious way. Someone who is particularly empathetic or intuitive, we might say, is able to gauge those responses quite accurately. And as I say, those people will tend to have elevated phi activation levels. A third connection, which for me completes a kind of a loop, and I'll see if I can articulate that loop in a minute. The third thing is to do with an individual's response to another individual, non-conscious, intuitive, or embodied responses. So when we are in communication with another human being, sitting across the table from someone, it's very well established that there's this complicated little choreography goes on of body language. One person leans forward, another person leans back. One person's voice tone starts to accelerate, the other person matches it. People's breathing levels often match when they're in conversation, that kind of thing. But at a more subtle level, a more detailed level, there seems to be also, in some cases, some matching going on. So that a person who is doing certain things with their eyes, maybe their eyes, if pupils are dilating, you wouldn't necessarily see that consciously. But if you're in a particularly empathetic relationship, empathetic isn't quite the right word, if you're in a particular kind of responsive relationship to that person, your own body will start responding in certain ways. From what I understand, increased dilation of the pupils is a sign of attraction, supposedly. So presumably there'll be some kind of somatic responses appropriate to that. Perhaps one's own pupils will start to dilate if one found that a kind of welcoming signal. Or maybe there'll be a a slight retreating of the body away from that, which you may or may not be aware of. It would happen non-consciously. How that relates to phi patterns is that people with elevated levels of phi activation are able to match the somatic responses, things like pupil dilation, the very detailed somatic communication, if you like, that's being offered by other people, and match it in one's own. This isn't the kind of maybe there's some kind of relationship to neuronal mirroring, but I don't think it's not the same thing. I'm not talking about mirror neurons or anything like that. I'm talking about a very particular sharing of somatic evidence between individuals in communication, which in that particular circuit seems to be all linked to this phi response, but it may be something else in this sense. It doesn't really matter. But I quite like the idea that it's called phi. So I say it's a kind of circle or a cycle because there seems to be three interrelated parts to it in terms of some kind of communication, sometimes of interrelationship, interaction with another human being, in that if I imagine myself as a recipient, first off as a signal, so I'm sitting across from someone and very subtle signals are being sent out, probably covertly, probably without the conscious knowledge of either of us, things like pupil dilation, things like slight changes in breathing, things like slight changes in posture. That information is coming across. If I am one of these people who has a high phi activation, then my body is entering into a very subtle choreography to match up to that set of responses, which I might experience as empathy. I might feel that as empathy. And because I have heightened phi, if I chose to, I could probably even actually kind of consciously get to that if I wanted to. I probably could go inside and detect increased pulse levels, increased levels of arousal in various parts of my body in response to what's happening. There's a close proximity between those various actions. And presumably in my responses to that, because I'm able to take in those communications and respond to them myself, viscerally, non-consciously, largely, and in this very detailed, fine-grained way, I could allow my own body to participate in an exchange. And hopefully, if the person I was sitting opposite also had a good phi network, they would be copacetic with that. I don't know what all that means, but it just seems that something interesting going on to do with this little fine-grained choreography of emotional state that happens with individuals. Kind of a transmission of effect, which is something I've been interested in, how emotions do move through groups of people. It's something that Teresa Brennan writes about in this beautiful book called The Transmission of Effect. She doesn't give that kind of account of it. She talks about accounts from things like olfactory responses, that there might be some kind of pheromones in the air that we're picking up, which, I don't know, maybe that's true. But personally I prefer a more kind of somatic, embodied, active, physical, visual set of signals. I think my dogs may be doing that actually. When my dogs see another dog on the path, I mean, it might well be smell with dogs actually, given their enhanced olfactory capabilities. But when they see another dog come up the path, they start to go into signalling mode a long way away, really. You know, I can see the little changes taking place in the set of their ears, or the level of the height of the tail, or what kind of things they're doing with the fur on their back. And it's quite subtle, I think. And I get the sense that there is some kind of strange little physical conversation taking place across these different canine somatosensory systems.